Greetings, class. Welcome to literature class. Hey, do you remember this guy? He's back. It's Langston Hughes. We heard a few of his poems last unit in our poetry unit, and now we're going to hear one of his short stories. So by now you were supposed to have read Thank You, Ma'am by Langston Hughes and pages 358, 362. As you know, Langston Hughes is a key member of the Harlem Renaissance. You watched a video on that a few weeks ago, and I invite you to watch that again for review just to get an idea of his impact as an artist, as an author. All right, so not only did he do poems, but he also wrote short stories, there's his biography. It's on page 330 if you want to read through that. Since we've already covered him, I'm not going to spend too much class time on that today. All right, so here's our story. Thank you, ma'am. Hopefully you liked it. Is Roger a very good thief? I'd say his first attempt, if that was his first attempt at theft, was an epic fail. Why do I say that? Well, first of all, he falls on his back or his butt. And is very easily overpowered by the person he's trying to rob from. He's trying to take Mrs. Jones' purse. After she, kind of overpowers him, he, is kind of intimidated by her authority. But note that she doesn't call the cops on him right away, but actually takes him to where? Yeah, so back to her house. And the very first thing that she does is not yell at him, not lecture him, but tells him to get cleaned up. Now, why do you suppose that was? Probably because he was dirty. They don't talk much about his home life, not much about his family as well. She doesn't ask him a whole lot of questions about any of that either. But he is told to clean up, and he does that. He has a chance to also escape her house, but he chooses not to do that because it is very important for him, for her to be able to trust him in this story. So kind of a turnaround. How old do you think Roger is in this story? Yeah, probably somewhere around 14, 15, I'm thinking. And why did he want to rob Mrs. Jones? Well, he's trying to get some suede shoes, right? And I guess that back in those days, I guess $10 would have done that, huh? This story was written in the 50s, by the way, 1950s. Okay, what else can we talk about? Turn to page 359, please. Did you catch the similarities in Mrs. Jones as Miss Barracombe from our last story? Kind of straightforward, no nonsense people, right? Trying to teach somebody something, a lesson, and that's what he's Roger's being taught in this story. Mrs. Barracombe's students obey her. Roger is obeying Mrs. Jones, even after he tried to steal from her. What do you think about? Even though we don't really hear a whole lot about it, what do you infer about Roger's home life? Yeah, he might not have regular meals. He might be very lonely at home. Why is the first thing that she asked Roger to do is wash his face? Why is that? Well, maybe she's trying to teach him that being neat and clean shows respect for for oneself and others, and also maybe she's trying to teach him some self-respect, to respect himself, to like himself. Because a lot of times when people steal things, it's a sign that they don't like themselves very much. They don't hold themselves to very high standards. They'll steal and they'll be a thief to get what they want. It's kind of interesting how after Roger tried to steal from Mrs. Jones, she still gives him the $10 for the shoes. And why do you think that is? Almost, it's like, do you think that's really going to teach him? I mean, he basically got the $10, but he didn't get the $10 by stealing. Someone willingly gave that $10 to him. So maybe she feels sorry for him. Maybe she likes him. She wants to teach him kindness so that he won't steal anymore, so that he'll remember that, somebody was really kind to me by doing this, even though this is how I treated them. And maybe that's going to be his motivation for turning his life around and not stealing anymore. That kind of reminds you of our relationship with our Savior, huh? That we sin against him every day, yet he still sent his son to die for our sins, and that's our motivation. The love of Christ is our motivation for loving others and being kind to others and obeying his commandments. So, does that work? Well, it works in our lives, right? That's our motivator. Jesus' death on the cross. So maybe someone being kind to him, like Mrs. Jones is, maybe that's going to be his motivator to turn his life around and not be a thief. So what are some of the character traits shown by Mrs. Jones' speech and actions? Well, especially back at the house, very kind, generous, obviously gave him the $10, wise, strong as well. Makes a true impression on him. All right. Now remember, theme is the underlying meaning of a literary work. Sometimes the theme is stated. This one is more implied, though, again. Basically, what is the author trying to teach us? That usually is the theme of the story. So why do you think Langston Hughes wrote this? So that we would maybe do what? Okay, I want you to think about that, and we'll get back to that. Let's go to page 361. What happens to Roger as he grabs, number one, as he grabs Mrs. Jones' purse, loses his balance, falls on his back? How does Mrs. Jones react to the attempted purse snatching? Well, she's not happy. Nobody would be, but she kicks him, she shakes him, she picks him up by the shirt. She demands, you pick that purse up, right? Number three, what reason does Roger give for trying to steal the purse? He wanted some suede shoes that he couldn't afford, so he's going to steal for it. Number four, how does Mrs. Jones treat Roger once they get to her home? Treats him firmly, but also a level of kindness and understanding there. First, she asks him to wash his face, then she asks his name. Then she asks whether he had supper. And so she kind of sympathizes with his desire for things he can't get and gives him the shoes. Now, why might she maybe sympathize with him a little bit? Well, she mentions to him during her speeches that she also was in a very similar situation as Roger, when she was younger. So maybe that gives her a little bit of credibility and understanding of the situation that Roger's going through. Number four, I think I already did that one. Number five, why do you think Mrs. Jones tells Roger, I've done some things too, which I would not tell you, son. Everyone's got something in common. She wants him to know that she sympathizes with the situation, and she's just not being judgmental. But she's also experienced it, and maybe she has something to offer him. Number six, what effect does her comments seem to have on Roger? Well, he stopped wanting to escape after that, right? He's anxious that Mrs. Jones trusts him not to steal her purse. She goes behind the screen. He very well could have just grabbed that purse and ran off, right? But, he's got a little bit of self-respect now. And also, her trust is meaningful to him, and he shows it by not taking off. Then number seven, why do you think Roger can't say thank you, ma'am, to Mrs. Jones? Is he just, is he just being rude? No, he wanted to not only say that, but he wanted to say something even more. Let's look at that last paragraph on page 361. It says, the boy wanted to say something more than thank you, ma'am, to Mrs. Luella Bates Washington Jones. That's her full name. Although his lips moved, he couldn't even say that as he turned at the foot of the stairs and looked up at the large woman at the door. Then she shut the door. So why do you think he didn't say it? Is he just being rude? No, he was probably being emotional. He got choked up, I think. And, not only did he at least say thank you, but he just couldn't muster the words, couldn't come out because he was just so emotional and touched by her actions. Do you think that, number 8, do you think it'll have a long-lasting oh, my book says something different here. Okay. Anyway, well, let's talk about theme of the story. So, what did you come up with the theme? What do you think the theme of the story is? A couple options here. I'm going to throw out. People respond well to positive interest in them. Understanding can overcome violence better than revenge. So maybe calling the police and having him put in juvenile detention or whatever could have taught him a lesson, but maybe a stronger lesson is taught through kindness. Maybe that's what Langston Hughes is trying to get across. Young people may benefit from firm guidance as he's getting mentored. He's getting guided here by Mrs. Jones. That they just need somebody strong, maybe in their lives, in order for them to make a change, make a turnaround. All right, so here are some things you need to know for your worksheet. Make sure that we assume that Roger's kind of changed forever after this experience. And so after Roger grabs Mrs. Jones's purse, he finds that life will never be the same again. He's got a different perspective on life. Roger tries to steal Mrs. Jones' purse, and why? Know that he wanted to buy some suede shoes. And really, once they get to her house, she seems to, Mrs. Jones, treat Roger kind of like a close friend or a relative. It's almost as if, that's it's her boy. So know that the first thing that Roger is made to do when he gets to Mrs. Jones' house is to wash up. Why did Mrs. Jones take Roger home? Was it to punish him? No, it was rather to help him realize that there's more than one way to achieve goals. The goal was to get the suede shoes. Well, there's more than one way to do that. Stealing isn't the answer. And then Roger realizes as he sits in Mrs. Jones's home that he really wants her to trust him. He wants to earn that trust, which he doesn't have because he tried to steal her purse. And Mrs. Jones' treatment of Roger indicates that she cares about him, right? I mean, to take the time to take him to your house and feed him and things like that shows that she does care. His attitude toward Langston Hughes's attitude toward this topic and thank you, ma'am, makes the situation kind of seem strong. It's a strong lesson and story for us to read and learn. Mrs. Jones says, "I've done things too," and she mentions this so that Roger maybe takes her a little bit more seriously, knowing that she's coming from a place of understanding Roger's situation and maybe his thought process. And then also Roger wants to thank Mrs. Jones for giving him food, giving him money, giving him a lesson about trust and values, yet none of that comes out of his mouth because he's so touched and choked up and emotional. Nothing is said. Theme is an implied one. I mentioned a couple possible themes you could come up with. Maybe you had another one as well, but it's not directly stated, so it's implied. Mrs. Jones was not too busy to help Roger in our story. We probably think Roger's about 14, 15, we said, right? Roger even offers to go to the store for Mrs. Jones. So he almost maybe sees her as a mother figure. Mrs. Jones, notice, does not talk about his family at all. Doesn't really, or not a whole lot, hardly at all. And so Mrs. Jones doesn't really, that's not a topic of conversation that she asks Roger about, hey, where are your parents? Are your parents home right now? That doesn't even come up. And also know that after talking with Mrs. Jones, Roger wants to earn her trust. His life has probably changed forever because of this lesson. Mrs. Jones is characterized as a very warm person, right? Kind, generous. And Roger is not really characterized as an angry, disillusioned troublemaker at all, but rather as a kid who's just kind of got the wrong idea that day and did something he wasn't supposed to do, and now is learning a lesson because of that. But seems like a good kid. At the end of the story, just know that Roger got choked up and couldn't express his thankfulness. All right, so that's all you need to know to be successful. and we'll see you next time.